Every journey leaves a story behind. From remote roads and unexpected encounters to life-changing adventures across the globe, these are the experiences that shape who we become. Welcome to People, Places, and Things. And now your host, Ryan Lowe. Let's hit the road.
Welcome to People, Places, and Things, and today we have Taylor Nichols. Welcome, Taylor.
Hey, how you doing, Ryan?
Pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm feeling good. I slept in this morning for the first time in 54 days, so that was really a treat for me.
Quite the journey you've been on, man. You deserve it, and we'll go into that journey you just completed here shortly. But I wanted to ask you about your background. What led you to travel and bikepacking to begin with?
You know, it's really funny you say that because I have not been a big traveler. I have been to Europe once or twice. Well, actually more than that because my wife is from Spain, so we actually go to Spain. But I'm in my 60s and I have not been a world traveler, and it's one of the things that hopefully I can do now. That I'm at this stage in my life, but I have been a bike traveler and I've done a lot of biking and I've done some bike trips on my bicycle, not a motorcycle. And I wanted to ride across the northern part of the country. I've spent a little bit of time in Montana, but never been to North Dakota or even Minnesota. And I wanted to do that on my bike because I think the bike travels at the speed of observation. And I really wanted to see that part of the world and meet those people. I love the fact that your show is called People, Places, and Things because that's what traveling's all about. It's about the people you meet and the places you get to see and the things, I guess, also that you get to see. And a bike is such a great way to do that. I said earlier that I haven't been a world traveler, and now that I'm starting to do more of that, I try to do it on a bike. When I go to Barcelona, Spain, I rent a bike and ride around. We went to Rome recently, and I rented a bike and rode around. We went to Greece, and I rented a bike and rode around Athens. And a bike is a great way to explore foreign cities and even foreign countries. So, as I'm starting to be more of a traveler, I'm including the bike in those travels.
That's amazing, man. And I think bike travel, like you said, lets you take it all in a little bit more. So it slows it down and it piques people's interest too. Like if you're on a road trip in a car, which is fine as well, it piques people's interest and gets more local attention. And then I think it makes people gravitate towards you in a way, right? A bit more.
Totally. That's so funny you say that because when you pull up to a little store in a little town in the middle of nowhere in a car and get out and go into the store, no one bats an eye. But when you ride your bike up to that store and lean it against the wall and, go into the store and, immediately feel the cool air or whatever the, environmental difference is, people, say, where are you coming from? Or, where are you going? Or what are you doing? Riding your bike? Like they sort of can't believe that. And so it's a real conversation starter. And as I'm sure you know from your travels, starting that conversation, once it starts, it just goes, it just explodes because people are meeting each other and talking to each other and learning about each other. And another thing I would add is when you're on a bike, you stop in almost every little town that you go through. And when you're in a car, you leapfrog so many of those little towns or little places or so many things you just miss because you're going 70 miles an hour. I think I stopped at every historical marker along my route, that talked about, the indigenous people that lived on that land first, or that talked about the first European settlers that, set up a settlement there, or how they struggled to get iron ore out of the land, or how they struggled to get logs down the river, or, you know, anything about the history of the area which you're going through, you have the time to see because you're going 10 miles an hour, not 70 miles an hour. Yet you still cover 70 or 80 miles a day. So it's not like you're walking and covering only 10 miles a day.
Totally. I think that's an excellent point. And while it does require more time, I think it is beneficial to be on a bike. You're getting your exercise, you're out in nature, you're taking it all in. And I wanted to talk about the journey you're on now, 3,500-mile journey from California to Michigan, and it's centered around family, which I think is so cool. We're going to start at the beginning. And what was the genesis of this trip? And talk about the trip from the beginning.
You know, I've always wanted to do a long trip. I've done a few shorter trips on my bike. And the great thing about the bike is the bike is a work multiplier. You know, I don't have to carry the 40 pounds of weight. The bike carries the 40 pounds of weight. And when I pick the bike up with the 40 pounds, it's heavy. But when the bike is moving, the 40 pounds is nothing. And it's very, well, not nothing, but it's much easier to carry. So traveling on a bike is a wonderful way to make it a little bit easier on the body. Um, I became really involved in bike advocacy when my children were old enough to sort of roam around our neighborhood. I live in West Hollywood, California, and that's sort of right smack in the center of Los Angeles. And my daughters would go to swim practice or swim team, or when they worked there as a lifeguard, and it wasn't really safe for them to ride their bikes a mile away. So we had to drive them, you know, some of the times to swim practice. And here they are, you know, 15, 16 years old, 14 years old, whatever. And they can't ride their bike to swim practice. So my wife or I have to stop what we're doing and drive them to practice, and then drive home, and then drive back and pick them up, and then drive home again. And that just seemed to me to be crazy. So I got pretty involved in how do we make our streets safer for people of all ages and abilities to choose which method of transportation they use to solve their most immediate uh, project at hand, going to the store, going to coffee, going to school, going to work. Um, and so combining those two things, I thought, I'm going to ride my bike from my daughters who now live in San Francisco to my dad who lives in the house I grew up in East Lansing, Michigan. And the cool thing about that is my dad's 101 and he's almost 102. And when I was riding across Montana on my bike, you see a lot of motorcycle groups. I wouldn't call them motorcycle gangs, but they're motorcycle groups riding across the country also. And I was stopping and talking with this one group of guys on motorcycles, and they were all, you know, older guys, and they were already drinking beer at like 11:30 in the morning on their motorcycles. And we were talking, and one of them said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm riding my bike to see my dad, who's 101." And without missing a beat, one of the guys said, "Well, you better hurry up," which I thought was kind of funny. Uh, so I just wanted to connect the two people that I was most involved in raising with the person who was most involved with raising me. And my younger daughter gave me a letter and said, "Here, hand deliver this to Dad. And so I wanted to think that I was connecting the different generations of our family by doing this trip, because it's a little bit selfish to take off on a 53-day trip and leave your life and leave your partner and, you know, your home and all those kinds of things. Because my wife had to pick up a lot of slack while I was on the road, and I was aware of that, and she made me aware of that. I'm teasing, but uh, so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to connect our family, and I wanted to have an adventure while I was still able to have it. And going over those mountains on a bicycle is an adventure.
Oh, it's a heck of an adventure, man. And it's really cool you were able to tie all that in together and make it centered around family and it's a different kind of journey, you know.
Right,
It gives it more of a purpose.
right, totally. And I think that that purpose is what carried me through the difficult times of the trip. There were a few days where the ride was really hard. Long climbs in the heat. Um, a couple of times I was on roads that were a little bit scary to ride your bike on because of the traffic. Most of the time I was not on those roads, but I was a few times. And then one time I got caught in a very bad rainstorm with thunder and lightning and wind. And you need to have a reason of why you're doing something like this when those things happen. Otherwise, you're like, well, screw this. I'm turning around. I'm going to go home. And because I had their support and their love, I kept going.
No, I think it's a great point that having that kind of motivation definitely propels you forward. So I wanted to go over it from the beginning. You said you started in California. Talk about that. And then I want to talk about your route.
Uh, there's an organization called Adventure Cycling, and they have maps of the whole US of bike routes. Some of those routes are on trails, and some of those are on gravel roads. Some of them are on old roads that are hardly used by traffic and cars. And some of those routes are on roads that are maybe a little bit busy, Highway 1 along the coast of California. Um, I'm an actor by trade, and May and June are typically slow months for actors. And so that was a good time for me to travel. And I knew I wanted to connect my daughters in San Francisco to my dad in Michigan. And I knew I wanted to travel in May and June. But I thought if I left in May and went directly east from San Francisco, I would be going over the mountains too early in the season. And it might be snowy or some of the roads might be closed. And certainly it could be very cold. So I decided to go up the coast of California into Oregon the last 2 weeks of May and then turn east and go across Oregon. So that's how I chose my route. So I went from San Francisco a lot of the time along Highway 1 up through Fort Bragg and Eureka and Crescent City, then into Oregon to Florence, Oregon, where I turned east and went to Eugene, Oregon, and then across Oregon into Idaho, across the Snake River in Idaho, up to Missoula, Montana. And Missoula, Montana is sort of the mecca of adventure cycling. That's where the office for the organization is, Adventure Cycling Association. And that's where a lot of bike tours and bike touring people go to. It's a really beautiful little community. So I went there and then I continued across Montana and then into North Dakota. And that was really fun because there were areas where it said on the little map that I had, there are no services for 70 miles. And 70 miles in a car is no big deal. You make sure you have a half a tank of gas and a soda or something like that, and you go for it. But on a bike, 70 miles is a full day for sure. And it could be longer depending on the weather, on the wind and things like that. So I had to make sure I had enough water, enough food. I had to make sure I knew where I was going to camp that night. And so that took a little bit of planning, but that was also really fun because I was completely on my own. I'm telling you, when I stopped to take a pee, I didn't even, get off the road. I just stood right there where I was and took a pee because there were no cars. If there was a car coming, I would hear it a mile away and, stop peeing or, move over to the side of the road. But it was really a great experience because I really felt like I was on my own. And that's a unique experience. If I used to say credit cards have no value in that setting because it doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank account. It doesn't matter what level credit card you have. there's nothing to buy, and there's nothing a credit card will do for you. You have to find out where you're going to camp, make sure you have enough water, make sure you're staying dry and warm, all on your own. And that was a learning experience for me.
Yeah, and there's beauty in the aligning those small details and having that sense of freedom to where, like, hey, I don't know where I'm going to camp. I gotta sort everything out, more or less on the fly. You're kind of, your route and where you're going, but day to day, there's a lot of details that you got to hammer out.
Right, right. And that boosts it boosted my self-confidence and my self-assurance that if something difficult or bad happened, I would be okay. I would survive. I lost cell coverage. I lost, of course, internet coverage. Uh, and I was on my own. And that's that's a unique experience, even if it was only for a day. I know people who backpack lose that stuff for days or weeks at a time. But one of the good things about bicycle travel is you are on the road and you do go through towns every 20, 30 miles usually. So there is a market, or there is cell coverage, or there is a place to get something to drink if you do run out of water.
Oh, totally. You do have a lot of more services when you're following a highway or something like
Right.
that. Did you ever have any scary moments on the road with vehicles? Maybe someone was texting a lot, or any close calls like that?
Yes, I did. And I don't know. We haven't talked about this yet, but I have a radio show and a podcast called Biketalk, and it is about how bikes can work as transportation, not just as toys for children. And because I was talking about this trip on Bike Talk to our listeners, there's a bicycle builder, a very well known bicycle builder named Craig Calfee, and he makes handmade bicycles. And a guy who works for him, Abe Downey, knew that I was doing this trip and knew that Highway 1 along California was at times a dangerous route with cars and trucks. And so he sent me this thing that they are developing called the Space Bar, which is an LED bar, thin, like a pool cue, that attaches to your seat and sticks out perpendicular to your bike, that lights up and not only shows cars that you're there by the light, but shows cars how much room to give you when they pass you. It's a 3 foot long bar that sticks out from your bike. And so it was really nice that Abe Downey sent me that from Calfee, and I put it on my bike and used it, and it was really great. But on one stretch of road in California, a logging truck, which are very heavy and very long and go very fast, came by me so close that it hit that space bar and broke it off my bicycle. And that means that he was within 2 feet of hitting me. And it scared me. And I was lucky that the bar was there, because had it not been, maybe he would have been even closer and maybe he would have hit me. And had he hit me, he would have killed me. Um, just because he was going 50, 60 miles an hour, and he went right by me. And I remember thinking that AI can't take those jobs away from those truck drivers fast enough, because AI would slow down, would move around, would pass me safely. Uh, and I'm not a supporter of AI, and I'm certainly not a supporter of taking away jobs from people. But that guy who was driving that truck knew he was close to me, and he did it anyways. And that really colored how I rode on the bike for the next few days. And it took me a while to get over that scare. And knock on wood, I'm okay. But that was a very scary moment.
Yeah, because you hear about all these accidents, and that brings it to reality. This guy getting close, snapping this bar up.
The space bar, which I think is a great title, like the space bar on your computer, or people that saw it called it what's the thing from Star Wars? You know,
Lightsaber.
the lightsaber. Yeah, sorry. That when people saw me, they'd say, "What is that? A lightsaber?" Because it lights up. It was LED, and it was really cool. And they were really great to send it to me. They didn't charge me for it, and I was really glad to have it. And sorry that it broke, but glad that it saved my life.
Yeah, well, that's I think a great advertisement for the space bar. Instead of just a regular reflector or something like that, or even like a smaller light, it
Yeah.
just brings a bit of awareness to the space you need to give
Exactly.
cyclists. You know.
I did use daylight running lights all the time. I used a red flashing light all the time and a white flashing light in the front all the time. And in certain areas, I wore reflective vest. Um, and one night, God, I was in the middle of Montana and there was no one. And it was such a beautiful night. I just kept riding. And I knew that I wanted to stop at this little place that was maybe 10 or 15 miles longer than I had planned on. Um, and so I ended up riding into the dark. And I got to tell you, it was breathtakingly beautiful. But I was very aware that when there was a car coming, that they needed to know I was there. So I even had another flashlight that when a car was coming and was quite a ways behind me, I would flash the light and just blink the light so that they knew there was someone up on the road there. And sure enough, then I didn't have any trouble at all. People were very aware that they saw me, and not that many cars passed me, anyways. And it was such an adventure riding in the night, not the full night, but going into 9, 10 at night on the road. I giggle even now, sort of remembering it. It was so much fun.
Yeah, and those moments, especially when there's an element of danger, you get that adventure aspect of it.
Yeah.
Makes it just a bit more exciting too, you know.
Yeah.
And uh, and you know better than I that cyclists are at risk every time they get out on the road. I'm sure you hear stories having your radio show and having access to this world on a deeper level. You know better than I that cyclists die every day from these accidents.
Yeah. Well, we wouldn't call them accidents. We would call them crashes because an accident sort of removes blame from anybody. And the truth is, people are at blame. Either they're driving too fast, they're on the phone, they've been drinking. There's any number of reasons why a car might hit a pedestrian or a bicycle or another car or a telephone pole. But a car doesn't hit a telephone pole just by accident. It hits the telephone pole because the person driving the car is distracted, or because the road is too wide and the cars are going too fast, or something like that. So I would take the word accident out and put the word crash in.
Right, right.
And you're right. We are very aware of the dangers, and that's why we do the show. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no worries, man. I think it's important to note that the distractions in our day to day lives somehow continue to spill over while we're driving when we need the most focus on
Right.
one thing and being in the moment. And phones are stripping us of that.
Huh.
Any of these distractions need to be, null and void when you're behind the
Right.
wheel.
Even sleeping, you've been working 10, 12 hours a day, whatever it is, and you're on the way home and you're exhausted and you fall asleep. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people lose focus behind the wheel of a car.
And it's the most important thing you can do. You're getting behind, something that weighs, a few tons,
Right.
up to a few tons, and it can kill people, and it does every day. So I
Right.
think it's very important to note that. And on your adventure, I wanted to go into kind of like day to day. What's your diet like?
My diet is whatever I want whenever I want it. um, I
Fair.
was riding, I think overall for the trip, my average was about 66 miles a day. but many days I was doing 70, 80. I think I did 5 or 6 centuries in the 53 days. That means over 100 miles in those days. Um, I would go to the grocery store when I was in a bigger town, and the food that I bought was the biggest volume thing that I had on my bike. I had oatmeal and nuts and raisins and coffee almost every morning. That's what I had in the morning. And when I was camping, sometimes I would just have coffee while I was packing up my bike, and then I'd ride 5 or 10 miles to a little town and stop at a diner and get eggs and breakfast and stuff like that, and more coffee. And at nighttime, I ate pretty simply, partly because I was riding a lot late into the evening because it was staying light so late. So I would have ramen noodles or something like that where I could just heat up water. I had a little jet burner stove, like a backpacker might use, and just a real simple, pot like this for heating up water to make coffee or to make noodles. Then I would add an avocado or a green pepper to the noodles, and that was actually really good because it was carbohydrates, it was hot, and it was a lot of liquid. And I was oftentimes a little bit dehydrated, so that liquid at night was very good. Um, then I'd clean up, and usually the first time I would sit still all day long was when I got into my tent and was ready to fall asleep. I would just, fill up my air pad and put out my sleeping bag and get in my tent with the idea that I'm going to write in my journal. And I would lie down, and the next thing I knew it was 7 o'clock in the morning. And because I was so tired, I slept late, 7:30, stuff like that, often. And then I would take my time in the morning and have coffee, because even if it didn't rain, my tent was wet at night from condensation and the dew and things like that. So I would get up in the morning and have coffee and wait for my tent to dry before I packed everything up. So sometimes I didn't leave until 9:30 or 10 in the morning. And then I would ride a little bit later that night. And I would stop oftentimes throughout the day if there were stores and buy stuff. But I always had fruit on me, apples and bananas. I always had some carbohydrates, pretzels or, rolls or muffins or something like that. And I'd carry those on the bike and kind of eat whenever I needed it. Almost every day, there was a 15 or 20 mile period where I would really get into riding. And I'd put my head down and put my hands in the drops and the bars and pedal, and I'd get into breathing, and I'd really have it just, really hyper focus into riding. But then there were also times when I would sort of get really sleepy and tired. And I learned to kind of embrace both of those moments. And if I was sleepy and tired, sometimes one time I just got off the road and lay down on the side of the road. There was so little traffic. I mean, I wasn't in the road, I was on the side of the road, but there was so little traffic, it didn't matter. And I needed to just lie down. And so I did. And I learned to kind of embrace those ups and downs of how I was feeling on the trip.
I think on a trip like that, it's super important to listen to your body, rehydrate, refuel properly, because you're exerting yourself physically every single day, mentally as well. The focus it consumes to be on a long bike ride it's a ton. So physically, mentally, you're expending at both ends.
That's a great point. And you're right about the mental aspect, because you have to constantly be watching the road. Are there cracks? Are there holes in the road? Are there bumps in the road? Things like that to keep your bike upright. And luckily, I didn't have any flat tires the whole trip, and I didn't have any crashes. I never fell. I never, had any trouble. It was really lucky. But I think that's also part of just being on the ball and not riding over nails or glass or something like that, if I did see it.
Well, yeah, that speaks to your focus, and yeah, there is a luck element to that.
Yeah.
Um, but it also speaks to your equipment. I wanted you
Yep.
to talk about that. What kind of tires? What was your bike? What like model of bike did you
Well,
do that with?
I bought this bike. This was a Surly, and Surleys are made in Wisconsin, and they are kind of gravel bike oriented bike company, Surley, and I have a Surly Midnight Special, and that's more of a road bike coming from a gravel bike family, if that makes any sense. And I bought the bike about 2.5 years ago with the idea that I wanted it for a trip like this. It's a steel bike, it's sturdy. The gear ratio is fairly wide. It could be a little bit wider, meaning that I have more gears to go up steeper hills. Um, and I put 38 tires on it, 38 millimeter wide tires. You know, when you see a bike that Lance Armstrong or the guys in the Tour de France ride, they're riding 23s or 25s, maybe. It's maybe sometimes they ride 28s a little bit wider, and I was riding 38s quite a bit wider. But real gravel bikes are riding 48s. And so I was riding a bike that was designed for rough roads, not for, you know, just gravel, but also not just for the road. I was riding a bike that was sort of designed for, carrying some equipment, but also rough roads. And like we just talked about, the bike served its purpose. It did a really nice job. I'm really happy with it.
You need a little bit more of that versatility, right? Because you may encounter some different terrain and stuff like that. May need a little bit more balance. So
Right. And
it's
I did. There were definite times when I was on gravel trails and really bumpy trails and gravel roads. And a normal road bike would have been very uncomfortable to ride, very rough riding. And even that, your hands take a beating because you have all this
right.
extra weight. It's a little harder to ride no handed. So your hands are on the handlebar all the time, and they're shaking and taking bumps of the bumpy road. So that was the area. People always say, "Well, how's your butt?" My butt was okay, but it was my hands that took the beating.
Yeah, and yeah, those longer trips are gonna wear you down physically no matter what. It doesn't matter. You're going across the country,
Right.
on a
Right.
bicycle,
Yeah.
which is that's a tremendous feat, man, and once in a lifetime type of trip. People dream to go on something like that their whole lives.
Right. Well, I had dreamed about it for a long time, Ryan. And I really thank my wife for kind of allowing me to do it and sort of giving me 2 months to go do it. And I'm glad I did it. I mean, and I don't think I'm done. Uh, there's more road out there, and I'll find a time and a place to do it again, I hope.
That's definitely one of those trips that get you hooked and like make you want to do more long distance travel, especially since I mean, it was very successful. You had not many traumatizing moments, right? You
Right.
didn't
Right.
crash and these things. So it just sets you up for success in the future. I wanted to talk about one of the most memorable, what was your most memorable moment from that trip?
Wow. I think the most memorable moment was when people went out of their way to help me. Um, this woman picked me up when I was in a very difficult situation. I was kind of stuck on the side of the road and it was raining very hard. And she picked me up, and she and her partner drove me 50 miles out of their way. And so while I'd love to say, this vista or climbing over this mountain or this descent down into the low hot springs, which was really great because I had climbed this big, long mountain and then done this like 17-mile downhill. And I got to these hot springs, and I immediately stopped and took off my clothes and got in the hot springs. And, that was really, really wonderful. But really, it was people And that's why I think your title is so great: People, Places, and Things. Because really it was the people, and the people who went out of their way to help me achieve my goal. That's what really sticks out in my mind as being the most memorable, wonderful part of the trip. Definitely. And there were many beautiful vistas and beautiful moments, but the people.
Yeah, I think more often than not, that's the case. With anyone's trips or travels, it's the people that make the biggest difference and the most impact in
Right.
people's trips. Because at the end of the day, they do not know you from Jack and Jill and didn't have to help you whatsoever. But it's that
No,
generosity, that hospitality, that kindness, that warmness that you remember. And usually, you pay it forward, and that just keeps going on. You would hope, and
that's a
that's what people remember.
yeah, that's a great note too, is pay it forward, because I remember this woman, Sherry, who helped me so much. I remember saying, how can I pay your gas? Can buy you lunch? And she just said, pay it forward. That's exactly what she said. And I have tried to do that, and I will continue to try to honor that.
Yeah, I think people see if someone is in distress, generally speaking, people are good people. Most people are good people. And
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly believe that. And
Yeah.
when you see a fellow human suffering, whether it be out in the rain, even though you set out to do this and you're cycling across the country, sometimes you just need a little help, little hand up,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and people are willing to give that. And I think that's incredible, man.
Yeah, yeah. And it restores your faith in humanity, as silly as that sounds, but it does.
Yeah. Because if you read the news, you'll think everyone's evil and everyone's out to get you. And then you just leave your house and, even cycling down the road or something, or walking, hiking or whatever, you'll notice that life's good. The
Yeah.
world is good.
Well,
And the majority of people are good.
it's funny, when I was in North Dakota and I told people that I lived in Los Angeles, they were like, "Wow, Los Angeles, that's crazy. Or do you have a gun? That's so dangerous there. All the homelessness, and it must be dirty and blah blah blah." And then when I told people from home, from Los Angeles, that I was riding through North Dakota, they would say, "Wow, it's so dangerous. Do you have a gun? Has anybody attacked you?" And so we live in these bubbles because of, media that says we can't trust each other. But the minute you actually connect those two worlds, you realize that, like you said before, people are good people, and they want to help you out.
Yeah, and it's just wonderful. That's the whole reason I do this podcast, is for the people, your
Right.
story, and just people having a space to tell their story. I think it's important, and it's maybe gives people a little inspiration to get out there and cycle across the country, maybe,
Right.
or
Right.
do some kind of trip that they were dreaming of.
Yeah. And I think it gets easier as you do it more. You are obviously, I mean, I'm looking at your bookshelf behind you. You're obviously a world traveler. And once you kind of break that, I'm not, what's the word? Once you sort of break out of your comfort zone, you realize it's not so hard. It's not so scary.
It's just taking that leap, that's the main thing. The first step is the hardest step. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to talk about your radio show, and you were mentioning earlier, Bike Talk. How long have you been doing that for? And you said the motivation behind it was kind of to bring awareness and to get more information out there into the world about cycling and everything bike.
Bike Talk, it's a radio show. We're in about 16 markets around the country, and it's, of course, a podcast available at Biketalk.org or Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you listen to things. And my partner, Nick Richard, has been doing it for a long time, about 15, 16 years. It started on underground radio, and we didn't really move into podcasts until the late teens. And I started to get involved with it in the late teens, and really became involved just before COVID hit. And that was because before COVID, we would record at the local NPR station in Los Angeles, KPFK. So we had to go to the station to record, and our guests had to go to the station to record. And that was a little bit onerous. We were tied for having people from LA. And when COVID hit and we all started using Zoom or Riverside or whatever platform people use to record on, all of a sudden the world was our oyster. And now we're really a world show. We have listeners from all over the world, and we have guests, Chris Bruntlett and Melissa Bruntlett, who live in Amsterdam, or who live in the Netherlands, not in Amsterdam. They've been on the show many times, and they're big bike thinkers. And so we're able to have politicians and advocates and authors and journalists. Emily Badger, who's a senior reporter for the New York Times and lives in New York City and writes about transportation, has been on our show many times talking about congestion pricing in New York. So we're really able to, I think, bring some of the best minds in urban planning and transportation planning together on our show and talk about how we got into this situation where we are in a auto normative world, car dominated world. Everyone always says America is the land of the free. And in many cases, we're not really free to walk to where we want to go or to ride your bike to where you want to go because the roads are designed for cars. And when you design a road for a car, any other mode of transportation doesn't really work safely in that environment because cars go so fast and use so much natural resources to make the roads, to build the roads, to make the cars, to fuel the cars, that it's not comfortable, nor safe, nor pleasant to walk along a busy road, to have dinner or coffee next to a busy road, and certainly not to ride your bike on a busy road. So Bike Talk is about understanding how a bicycle can be a very important tool in the tool belt of transportation. We often say light rail and subways and buses need first mile and last mile connection, meaning the subway may not stop right at my house, but it stops a mile away from my house. Well, do I have to drive to the subway to get on the subway? In New York, you would just walk. But in LA, maybe that's not safe or that's not easy. So you can ride your bike to the light rail, to the train, to the subway, to the bus. And so we're all about creating a safe place to bike and creating choices for people to choose the tool of transportation with which best suits their need to run that errand. It might not be reasonable to drive your car 3 blocks to have coffee with a friend or to go to the library or to go to work or to go to school or go to the store. I mean, if I can ride in my 60s, from San Francisco to Michigan carrying 40 pounds of weight on my bike, other people can ride to the store and bring home some groceries if we as a society create a space for them to do so safely. But if they have to compete with cars going 40, 50 miles an hour, they're not going to do it. And I don't blame them. But if we can make a safe route for them to go to school, to go to work, to go to the store, we can change our neighborhood. And when we change our neighborhood, we can change our community. And when we change our community, we can change our world. Sorry, I got kind of on a soapbox there, but that's what we talk about. And it's not us talking about it. It's urban planners, transportation planners, people who really understand how housing and transportation are integrated.
Totally, yeah. Like that's what I want to hear, This conversation is more than worth it to have because simply put, I mean, if you're speaking on environmental impacts, you're speaking economically, you're speaking about health. Bicycles
Yep.
help all of these things. Like you said, this especially here in the US, we're so car dominated. It's
Right.
our infrastructure is so set up around driving cars around. If you don't have cars in a lot of places, you're screwed. The public
Right.
transit's not there. These things like Europe have. And even you're just speaking about the Netherlands, you had a couple people on. Their bike infrastructure is second to none.
Right.
They're relatively flat place. It makes it a bit easier, but at the same time, they've made it a point of emphasis to kind of build that culture
Right.
around
And
bicycles.
I would even add that in the 1970s and early 80s, Amsterdam was just like Los Angeles, just like New York, just like other big American cities that were dominated by the car and by parking the car. You had this historic city with a parking lot in the middle. And so what they did was they removed the parking and put a people plaza with restaurants and shops and coffee, and they made that a really pleasant area. And when you do that, the property value goes up, the tax receipts for those businesses go up, and everybody is out on the street meeting and seeing other people. And now Americans go to those places so that they can walk around in a car-free environment. And it's like Americans go to Disneyland and walk on Main Street and say, God, isn't this great? This is how America used to be. And yet in their own neighborhood, they fight against bike lanes and they fight against making roads safer by slowing down cars. Yet on vacation, they go to places where they can, walk and be quiet and be safe. So it's kind of funny.
Right. Right. But I think that's where your podcast is very important, and the fact of you need to bring awareness and educate people to kind of build that foundation that will hopefully carry through to a new policy, which would allow more infrastructure for bikes and just kind of build that up. And that's what we need.
Right.
I think it's super important what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We like to say it's like taking the red pill in the Matrix. Once you take that red pill, or is it the orange pill? I always forget. But
The red pill.
the red pill, thank you. But once you take that pill, then you see the world and you go, oh my God, I literally can't walk to the store across the street because the crosswalk is a half mile away and the road is 8 lanes wide. And so I have to get in my car and drive through the parking lot, go to the stoplight, turn left, go, another block, turn left, and go into that parking lot. And there's no reason for us to do that. Parking takes up so much space and adds so much cost to apartments and to stores because they have to buy and rent extra land for people to store their cars. And once you see that, then you realize, oh, there is another way that we can design our built-in environment.
Yeah, it's excellent. That's an excellent point, man. And I think it's trending in the right direction in the future. We just need to be more active and less lazy as a nation as well. I think just minimal exercise, just getting on a bike every day or doing something like this will help us. Help the burden our healthcare system has encumbered for many years due to lack of movement. And I think just that movement is crucial to building a great nation.
There's no question, getting in your car to drive to the gym is ridiculous, And of course, people do that all the time because that's the only way to get to the gym, as opposed to riding your bike to the gym or as opposed to just riding your bike. But getting in your car to drive to work, to sit at the desk at work all day and then get back in your car and drive back home, that's almost more tiring than riding your bike, because riding your bike invigorates you. Excuse me.
No, it absolutely does. I just went on a bike ride last night, speaking of, for about an hour. I live out here in Utah, Heber City, Utah.
Oh, I've been to Heber City many times. I love Heber City.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place, right?
Yeah. There's a huge lake right there.
Yeah, you got the Jordanelle, and then you got Deer Creek Reservoir as well.
Yeah.
Strawberry is not too far away.
That Deer Valley is going to open up. That whole side of the mountain that is opening it up. That's near Heber City, right?
Yeah, the Mayflower side. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they've expanded a lot. The development is actually insane. So it's growing, and
Yeah.
they are expanding like bicycle infrastructure as well. So it's good to see. It's good to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Heber City is a great little town. I definitely know it. Great. I didn't know that that's where you were.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I love Utah. Love Utah.
Yeah.
But well, Taylor, I'm going to wrap this up here soon. But I did want to ask you, if you were to leave some advice, whether it be for bike packing, travel, or just in general, what would that be?
Well, that's such a great question because there are so many things that come to my mind right off the bat. And I've been asked that question before on a much more practical level. And on a practical answer, I'm going to say for bike travel, know how to use your maps and your navigation systems because it takes so much onus off of you of having to stop and look at your map and having to figure out where you are or are you going the wrong way. It's really great to understand how the adventure cycling maps work. And there's a app called Ride with GPS, which is really great. That gives you turn by turn directions sometimes, and that is very freeing. And that allows you to not look at the map or to worry, but to look at your environment around you. So that's my most important piece of practical information. Know how your navigation systems work. And they work differently on the computer than they do on the phone. Sometimes everything does not cross over as easily as we might think. But my other thought about advice, and I said this at the very beginning of the show, is, I have not been a big world traveler. And I think it's because I was a little scared. I didn't speak French. I didn't speak, Chinese or Japanese or Spanish very well or whatever. And so I stayed within my comfort zone. And I think my piece of advice, what I learned on this trip, is dare to get out of your comfort zone, and you'd be surprised what happens. My comfort zone exploded. It's no longer this big. Now it's, I'm comfortable in a lot of different settings. And so talking to you has really sort of made me realize that I got to make up for some lost time and do some more traveling to see some people, places, and things.
Yes, sir. And I'm sure you're going to make that happen, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate the advice, and I'm sure the listeners will as well.
great. Well, Ryan, thanks a lot. What's your next trip?
I will be going in a few weeks to Cabo. This one's for a bachelor party. My buddy's getting married. So
You're gonna have a
we'll
blast
be doing
there.
a bit of scuba diving. Yeah. So getting my next scuba dive certification. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, that'll be great. Well, have fun in Cabo, man.
Thank you, dude. Well, have a wonderful evening and tell your dad happy early birthday for me.
I will. Ryan, thank you very much.
Yeah, man. And make it out to Heber City, Utah sometime.
I do. I ski there a lot. So
Yeah. If you're ever out here, let me know and we'll get up and ski.
great. I go to Deer Valley a fair amount and Alta and all that.
I'm definitely game to go to any of the mountains out here. So I
Perfect.
love skiing and a big part of my life. So yeah, man.
I'm sure.
All right.
Okay.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. And folks,
Perfect.
always remember, the world is your oyster.
That's it for this episode of People, Places, and Things. Follow along at Ppt.travel.com, on YouTube at Ppt.travel, and Instagram at JR_low. Until next time, keep exploring.